Our brain is an electromagnetic organ. Our central nervous system, every cell communicates with its neighbours to see how they are using electromagnetic signals. And so it's an internal thing. And there's a concept in physics and in telecommunications called interference, resonant absorption, an aerial effect. We have all of that in our bodies. And so I was surprised to find that there's so sensible biological, biophysical understanding within our bodies that says these signals interfere with us through resonant absorption by our brains, through damaging our chromosomes in our cells. And so I came up with these simple ideas. Okay, if we have a conductor in us, like water, can we be an aerial? If we're an aerial, what is the organ that goes through our body? Our circulation system, our blood, which is full of water. So what's the main cancer that's caused? Leukemia, which occurs in the blood and the bone marrow going through our bodies. And so whether we're going under power lines with these fields causing an induced field in our bodies with a current flowing down our body to earth, or we're standing in a radio field that hits us, gets absorbed in our body and causes a current to flow to earth, same thing, then we get leukemia. In our sensitive brains, we get brain cancer. And so I have found all these studies showing chromosome damage, DNA damage, which then suggests that you might have other diseases like neurological disease, heart disease, reproductive disease, and there are occupational studies showing all of those diseases, and for radiofrequency exposure, for electrical workers, and I've now done the research about the natural radiation, which was here long before people existed, and I find exactly the same health effects.
Really? So, I would like you to talk about that. The health effects from what? I mean, when you say natural, and I know that you've been doing research about the effects of the sun and all kind. Well, you explain it because I don't know that much, but it's very interesting and important.
Yes, well, it's a phenomenon which was first thought about by Professor Schumann in Germany in the post-war period, and so they are termed the Schumann resonances. And they are produced by thunderstorms, and most of the thunderstorms in the world are near the equator, that are the lightning's going bang, 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 and it radiates energy out. It's strapped between the ionosphere and the Earth and goes around the Earth at the speed of light. And if you work that out, it goes around 8 times a second, 8 cycles per second. And then there are harmonics at about 14 and 21 and 22 and 26 cycles per second. And I noticed the similarity between the human EEG in our brains, the brain waves, and these frequencies. And I went back to the Schumann research from the 1950s in Germany and found that they had said that there is a very strong similarity between the human brain waves and the Schumann resonances. So let's do some research to see whether can we alter them by external signals. And they found that the nighttime dominated signals are less than 5 cycles per second. In the daytime are typically 10 cycles per second and more. And they exposed students to 3 cycles per second signals and slowed them down, and 10 cycles per second and sped them up.
You mean so their behavior, their thinking, everything in all their bodily functions speed up or slow down?
Their brain waves speed up, and their calculation ability gets faster and slower. Their reaction time changes. And the research that followed up here in the United States showed that yes, reaction time changes, the EEG changes, and it's caused by calcium ion efflux and influx. And calcium ions control the neurotransmitters in the brain, form the EEG patterns, are well organized if you're thinking well, and they're well organized at these frequencies. And if you expose the brain to these frequencies, you alter the calcium ions, and therefore alter the brain patterns. Now that's what Professor Ross 80 in California showed, repeated by the EPA, Carl Blackman, and it's been repeated in about 10 or 20 laboratories around the world that calcium ions are changed by these signals. So it's very well established, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of physics and biology. So the frequencies match, and the cells react and change their behavior, which changes the brain pattern, the reaction time. And so I thought to myself, are the Germans correct? Because there is now a large body of research showing that after a solar storm, after there are flares on the sun, there's a geomagnetic storm on Earth, then there are all these effects found in the human population, like there's more aggression, there's more suicide, there are epileptic fits, there's more sudden infant death syndrome, so there are heart attacks. So it goes through the spectrum, and there's an undulation in the sunspot cycle of 11 years. So you can find that undulation in the suicide rate. You can find it in the benign breast cancer rate. So I thought, how can spots on the sun cause cancer on Earth, or cot death, or sudden infant death syndrome on Earth? And is it something that biology talks about, which is homeostasis? Is there a natural level that if you go up above it, you cause problems in the vulnerable, or if you go down, you cause problems in the vulnerable, which would suggest that there is a tuning into the signal. And that's what the Germans were saying. This signal synchronizes the timing of our brains. I said, well, if that's the case, then if it changes, it might change our hormones. And the most recent research in Colorado shows electrical workers have all sorts of reduced melatonin. That's our day-night neurohormone. It works with the serotonin. Serotonin's the daytime hormone, melatonin the nighttime hormone. They showed the electrical workers had reduced melatonin, and when they used their cell phones, they had reduced melatonin, and they found this undulation which didn't relate to any of those factors. So they related it to geomagnetic activity, the solar activity effect on the ionosphere and our magnetic field. And that showed the higher the geomagnetic activity, the lower the melatonin in those workers. And a dose response, which is a very strong connection. And so the idea that our brains are tuned by this signal, that when it goes too high or too low, it alters our brain activity, it alters our melatonin, our serotonin. That means that all the things that our daily cycle changes, you go to sleep, your brain slows down, your heart slows down, your breathing slows down, your stomach slows down, because it's connected to your body by the serotonin melatonin system. And so if something interferes with that, then it can cause brain effects, heart effects, stomach effects, reproductive effects, cancer effects, because melatonin is a very potent free radical scavenger. So if it's reduced, it can cause cancer and all those other effects. And so the research confirms it. And then I said, if that's true, then in occupational exposures that are 1,000 times higher to 1,000,000 times higher, the same effects should be found, and they are. And from RF, radiofrequency radiation, microwave radiation, the effects should be found, and they are much higher, which is sensible because they impact your body much more strongly.
Wow, well, this is really a lot to take in, Dr. Neil Cherry. And I'm sort of getting the drift, and probably some people are understanding more and some people are understanding less. So, but I'm getting that there's a huge amount of evidence and incontroversial amount of evidence to show that there are connections between our environment and our brains and our thinking and sleeping and behavior. And you even said suicide and violence and all these things. And there are many things that are affecting us in these ways that don't get talked about. So it's always amazing to me when people say, oh, we don't know what causes cancer. I mean, there's just, even without knowing about science, I can imagine what all these disruptions in our environment cause cancer. So how, if you would say more about what, how this is affecting our lives, and I mean, we're speaking on the radio here. People are hearing us on the radio. Should we turn off the radio and not talk on the radio anymore? I've always heard that sunspots affect shortwave reception, and it didn't mean a thing to me. But so I guess in the short time we have, we can only say that there's just a lot of, besides what you've already explained, that there's a lot of connections between these things, and then there's the political aspect and the health aspect that doesn't get paid attention to. So if you could talk a little bit about that and leave some time about what you think we could do instead, because I know that you work with solar energy and wind energy and have some ideas about how we can do it differently so it will be not bad for our health.